One thing that I think is interesting to track about the housing market right now is when we see these stories about how when interest rates fall, that a bunch of people kind of jump back into the market and try to buy. And it turns out that the average loan size on a purchase application right now is about $428,000, which is the largest amount since May of 2022. So it's a lot that people are trying to borrow right now to get into a house. But that's not even the crazy part. The crazy thing is that refinance demand jumped 18% in the past week. Now it's still 75% lower than it was a year ago. But the crazy thing is this, guys, refinancing means you already have a mortgage and you want to get a new one for presumably a better deal, right? That's the whole reason to do a refinance to begin with, is to get a better rate than what you have right now. And the puzzling thing that I find about this is supposedly so many people have rates that are in the low threes right now. And if that's the case, why are people jumping in to refinance at a time like this? Because even though the rates have dropped a little bit, they're still far higher than they were a year ago. So why would so many people be looking to refinance at a time like this? To me, it's one of those head scratchers that makes zero sense, because the only people who would be doing this, in my opinion, would be people that have gained quite a bit of equity in their home since they bought it maybe a year or two ago, and are willing to refinance and take the higher payment, not because it's a better deal, but because they need the money right now. And usually they'll do this in the form of a cash out refinance. And I wish that whenever these stories came out, it would tell us, why are people doing these refinances? Are they doing cash out refinances, or are they actually getting a lower interest rate than what they had before? And it doesn't tell us these things, so all we can do is take wild guesses at what's happening. And just like we've been talking about all the other things that kind of spell trouble with the housing market right now, to me, this is just the latest installment of that. It's people getting into trouble with the financing of their home some way, somehow, because the reality is pretty much nobody should be refinancing right now. I don't see how anyone has a rate that's higher than what they have today, because if you do, you would have had to bought this house, back in the last housing bubble. Then it begs the question, why didn't you refinance when rates were lower? You know what I mean? There's a lot of weird things going on right now that don't make a lot of sense, and that's what we're trying to do here, is make sense of this on the channel. Now, since the real estate market has been going through a huge slowdown right now, one aspect of the business that I never even thought of that's getting crushed by this, as well as not just real estate agents and mortgage brokers, but also home stagers. That's one I never really would have thought of. A couple interesting things about home stagers is their job is to make the home look as warm and presentable as possible and give people the idea of what it would be like living in this house. And that's the whole reason that sellers or realtors hire home stagers, is because they don't want all their personal items there. People don't want to walk through the house and see, your whole life story and feel burdened by the sellers, like, hey, these guys are constantly watching what I'm doing. They want to walk through a house where they can envision, like, this house looks like it might be for me. I could see myself living here. It's pretty much the home stager's job. And some of them actually go to the length of looking at the demographics of who buys in this area. So like, for example, if it's a retirement community, they would stage the home completely different than if they were kind of targeting a first-time home buyer looking to start a family. And they might do that in ways of like the style of the furniture they use, or if you're targeting a family house, where people might have kids or are gonna have kids, they'll design a couple of the bedrooms to have like, kid stuff in there to make it look like this could be the perfect home for our family, right? And supposedly staging a home properly can bring in more buyers and higher offers as well. Home stagers are kind of perplexed that more of them are not getting hired right now, because at a time when it's very difficult to sell a house because the buyer demand has mostly disappeared in a lot of places, you would think that more agents and more sellers would want to hire a home stager in order to help that house sell faster and for a better price, but that's really not the case right now. And I'm guessing one of the reasons they're not hiring them is because everyone's feeling the squeeze on this. You know, when real estate agents are making half the sales that they were a year ago, same thing with mortgage lenders, they're cut down to maybe 20% of the lending they were doing a year ago. So things have changed dramatically for these guys, and to hire a home stager costs about 1% of the house's purchase price, so that's a lot. So you're talking a $300,000 house, costs $3 grand to get the house staged properly. I don't know, guys, let me know what you think about this. Like me personally, every time I saw a staged listing, it never did anything for me. It never made me think, oh, this place is nicer than it really is, or anything like that. Maybe because I toured a ton of homes, empty, you know, full of garbage, nice ones, crappy ones. And I always used to tell my clients, like, just pretend this place is empty, you know, imagine none of this stuff here, or if it already was empty, then obviously that was pretty easy. That way you get the feel of how you might decorate it yourself, or what you might put in there versus what someone else is doing with it. I would like to know if you guys have ever been swayed by the home staging process. Have you ever walked into a home that was beautifully staged and said, oh, I'm buying this house because everything here just looks beautiful, and you know, I'd be willing to pay more for this house because of the way they have this staged. Has this ever mattered to you is basically what I want to know. Now today I just have a bunch of random real estate stories that I thought were interesting that I wanted to share with you guys. And the next one is about this landlord that is actually working closely with his tenants when it comes to rental price increases. He's up in the Tacoma, Washington area, and just like everywhere else, they had eviction moratoriums in place. And back during the pandemic, when they had all this going on, you had people not paying rent, and you're not able to raise the rent on people, but yet the property expenses went up 30% during this time. You know, from things like homeowners insurance that basically doubled for him, and property taxes going up, labor shortages, so anytime you need to hire a contractor or a handyman costs way more than it used to, things like that. And this landlord said that whenever the eviction moratoriums expired, rents in this area went up 30 to 40% after that. And get this, his approach to keeping his tenants happy is he would actually meet with every single one of his tenants individually with a binder with all the recent rentals in the area, showing them what places have been renting for, and having a discussion with them and going over the comps to show them, hey, prices have gone up a lot in this area, so have my expenses. And he would basically ask them, what is a fair price? What do you think you should be paying here? And apparently by taking this approach has actually worked out pretty well for him, because a lot of the times he would actually be able to increase the rent by 20, almost 30% in some cases, which is still less than what the average is around the area in terms of increases. Man, did that place look like a drug shack or what? Scary. So basically, in his area, a lot of rentals were increasing the rent by about $600 a month, and most of his tenants asked for a $300 to $400 a month increase versus the $600, and he agreed. But I think this is a very good lesson that can be learned for anyone aspiring to be a property investor, because he said that, you know, if I were to just go in there and raise the rent 20% or 25% and not even have a conversation with anyone, they'd probably get pissed off and move out and say you're a jerk for raising the rent. But because he takes this one-on-one personal approach with his tenants, he has a good relationship with his tenants, and he's been a landlord for about 10 years, and he's only had to replace about 4 tenants in his properties during this time using this approach. So keeping tenants in place, and especially paying the rent as a landlord, is a huge winning strategy. One of the most expensive parts of being a landlord is not just home repairs and expenses, but the turnover. Every time you have to turn over the property, repaint it, new floors, make a ton of repairs, and things like that to get the property ready for the next tenant can cost a lot of money, And if you're doing that on a regular basis because you have tenants always coming and going, then that's going to eat big time into your profit margin for your rentals. And he also says one of his winning strategies, besides just being real and being personable with his tenants, is he would actually ask all of his tenants, if this were your property, what would you fix about this place? You know, if you own this house, what would be the first thing you would fix here? And he actually listens to his tenants and takes their advice. And you would think that sometimes people would take advantage of this and ask for some crazy things like a new roof or a new driveway, whatever. But in fact, a lot of his tenants only ask for things like, oh, you know, I would like to have a ceiling fan with a remote. You know, I need a new screen door for the sliding glass door. Or just little things like that that are not really a big deal, but go a long way in keeping the relationship going between the landlord and the tenant. And not only does that build trust, but it also keeps the tenant satisfied in the sense that at least my landlord's not raising the rent as high as a lot of the other local landlords are, and as well as the fact that, you know, if something's broken, he's here to fix it, or he's actually asking me, how can I improve this place? And I'm sure anybody who's a renter right now hearing this story would probably love it if their landlord was this cool. And it's very hard to come across landlords that are this cool, guys. I mean, for me personally, when I was renting, it was a mixed bag. I had a couple of really cool landlords, not quite as cool as this guy, but still pretty cool. And I had other ones that were not great at all. So it really does depend. And if you are someone who's going to be out there renting right now, taking the wait and see approach when it comes to the housing market instead of buying, maybe part of your rental criteria should also be who's the landlord. It's basically a flat out guarantee that if you go and rent a place at a big apartment complex or something like that and there's a corporate landlord, you know, you're not going to get this type of treatment, guys. You're just another number, you're another name in the book, another tenant paying the rent. You know, you're not going to get anything like this. I know sometimes maybe that's the only choice you have in your local area to be close to work or whatever it is, but if you can find an individual landlord that seems to be, you know, very cool like this, I think that can highly improve your quality of life at a time when rent is killing everyone's pocketbook. This rental story kind of just leads me right into the next rental story, because in San Diego, they're just doing everything they can, it seems like, to hurt local property owners, specifically landlords, because they're trying to come up with this new rule where if you have a no-fault eviction, which is basically just, you know, you as the landlord saying, hey, I want to move back into this place, or I need you to leave because I'm going to sell it, or I need you to leave because I want to remodel it. Different things like that is what they consider a no-fault eviction. It's not like the tenant did anything wrong or they're not paying rent. The landlord just wants to take the property back for whatever reason. After all, it is their property, right? And this is what they're trying to do to landlords over there right now. They're trying to propose a law where if there's a no-fault eviction, the landlord must pay 3 months rent to the tenant before they move out. But obviously, this is a huge infringement on property rights. And there's also another law that they're proposing saying, hey, if the landlord wants you to move out so they can do renovations on the property, then they basically have to foot the bill for the tenant's moving expenses and finding another place to live or putting them up somewhere temporarily. Like, what? I mean, I just couldn't believe this when I read this, guys. This is so California. I feel like they're just trying to destroy every form of freedom and homeownership that's available in this state. And don't get me wrong, guys, I love California. In fact, I'm going to spend some time there this summer just because I love the weather there so much. But that's about as far as it goes these days in terms of like, what is there to like about this place? Because imagine being a landlord and you want to renovate the property and they pass one of these laws and they tell you, well, you have to foot the bill for your tenant to go somewhere else while you do this, as if renovating the property doesn't already cost a fortune enough. And people who are speaking out against this are saying, hey, wait a minute, you guys are just going to make things worse because people that maybe can't afford to pay the tenants 3 months rent or, you know, pay for them to relocate for a renovation or anything may end up just saying, you know what, we're not going to renovate this place because of this new law and it's just going to cost too much, we can't afford that. Or if we are going to have you leave and we got to pay these 3 months, well, now we have to sell the property because, you know, we're just losing too much money with this. So that's basically what they're doing, is they're kind of forcing people into a situation where they may have to sell where they otherwise might not have, just because of these ridiculous laws. So basically what they're doing is local government is attempting to solve the housing problem that it created by stripping away rights of private property owners. I mean, how does this make sense? In what universe do people think that this is a good idea? And more importantly, people that live there and actually own property and pay taxes, why are they voting in these politicians that are making these rules and striking things directly against you? You know, like, why would you want people in office like this that are hurting you? I mean, it makes no sense to me, guys. To me, when I hear stories like this, I feel like California could be on the brink of some sort of revolution, in terms of, like, the people that live there are so sick of these idiocracies that are happening every single day. And, you know, a lot of people handle it just by leaving, but the ones who are staying behind and still live there and still own property there are probably going to be getting so sick of this soon, where I can't imagine this going on for much longer, but who knows? It's California, anything is possible. And I have a second story out of California that sort of backs up why the housing market hasn't gotten completely obliterated just yet with default. Because they just announced in California that they're going to be extending help to new groups of homeowners over there who've had a partial claim or a deferral, who missed a second mortgage payment after June of 2022. And one of the reasons they're doing this is because they still have a lot of unspent money to the tune of $1 billion from the American Rescue Plan provided by the federal government. And so far, they've given about 10,000 households about $28,000 in assistance to help people pay their mortgage on time, or to catch up on property taxes, different things like that. And they're saying that many California homeowners are still recovering from the financial hardships of the pandemic. And their primary goal is to keep families in their homes, prevent foreclosures, and assist homeowners on a stable path to financial recovery, is what they're saying. Now, think about this, guys. If they weren't doing this, if they didn't already help all these people that already got money, and they weren't going to continue to help people like they're going to right now, that's already over 10,000 people that would be in some stage of the foreclosure process right now, okay? And not even including the amount of new people that they're going to be helping from this program who might otherwise go into foreclosure if they didn't get this assistance. Now, I'm not saying that people shouldn't get help. But what I am saying is, you know, you had this state that had everything locked down longer than anywhere else, had eviction moratoriums in place longer than anywhere else, and now they're acting all surprised that people are having a hard time staying in their homes, and people are still recovering economically from all these terrible decisions that they made over there. Like, yeah, no kidding. Because when you shut down the entire state for, you know, the better part of a year or two, and you know, don't allow people to go to work, and close down local businesses, and let tenants live scot-free while the owners have to pay the bills, it's not really going to work out too well in the end. And they're starting to see this now. But the real interesting reason I wanted to bring up this story was not really to pick on California, but to highlight the fact that there is still money out there that was printed during the stimulus, during the health crisis that we had, and that's still being used today to kind of boost people's lifestyle and help people stay in homes. And if that money was not out there, if it was not available to people, then all of these people would essentially be losing their homes to foreclosure right now and be in much worse financial shape than they already are in. But the interesting thing about this is happening at a time when unemployment is literally at the lowest level that we have seen since the 1960s, guys. And just last week, Biden was touting how great the economy is, and you know, this is all because of his doing and things like that. Look at the unemployment numbers and all these things. Everything is going so great right now. But What's going to happen when these people get the assistance and they catch up on their payments and they fall behind again? There's not going to be any safety net from there. What's going to happen when the interest rate hikes that the Fed is doing start to actually work and people start losing more and more of their jobs and the unemployment numbers actually start to climb? What's going to happen then? And I really haven't been convinced that this time around during this housing crash we're going to see a huge wave of defaults, but that could easily happen once the unemployment numbers start to rise. And just by looking at stories like this, we basically know that we don't actually even need unemployment numbers to even go up for people to start defaulting, because with inflation where it's at and how much everything costs right now, and people that are still reeling from the pandemic, and it's not their fault that they live in a state where everything got shut down and they couldn't work and they couldn't make money or whatever, you know, are being punished by this right now. My thing is this: what happens when all of this financial help is finally gone forever and people are still having a hard time, and you have a high interest rate environment with a recession, with unemployment numbers rising? Do you think that mortgage defaults are going to go up? I mean, I think we're going to see a huge uptick in defaults at some point down the road once this all starts coming together. But the crazy thing is, I don't even think we need that to happen to see home prices come down, because we're already seeing them come down due to the economic situation. And that's just going to make things dramatically worse, in my opinion. And this is why I keep telling everybody who watches my channel, ignore these stories that you're seeing. We're telling everybody, oh, the economy's already in recovery mode, things are just going to get all better from here. In no way, shape, or form is any of that true. And we can see that just from stories like this, knowing just how many people are still hurting right now financially that need help, and if it wasn't for that help, they'd be on the streets. And we don't even have the recession. We don't even have high unemployment yet. And those things are coming. So get ready, guys. That's all I've been telling everybody. Get ready for this to happen. If you enjoyed this video, make sure you click the bell notification down below. YouTube will alert you every time I post a new video. And if you don't want to wait, check out my next one on the screen right over here, and I'll see you in the next one.